WFYI podcasts are brought to you by Visit Bloomington. With over 350 restaurants to choose from, Bloomington, Indiana is truly a food lover's paradise. Go to visitbloomington.com to discover what suits your taste.
This is WFYI News Now. It's January 30th, and I'm Darian Benson. On today's show, lawmakers call for the FSSA to pause proposed cuts, a bill that could improve safety on public beaches, and we've got a feature on why some Indiana companies are paying for their employees' education and training.
Quality and the skills of your workforce have risen to the top in terms of importance because we're now in a talent-driven economy.
Those stories coming up, but first, housing advocates gathered at the State House yesterday to rally behind legislation that protects renters against negligent landlords. As Ben Thorpe reports, only one bill on the issue is likely to get a hearing.
Tenants and housing advocates met at the State House to air frustration over the lack of protections for renters.
When I say rent to, y'all say hi. Rent to, rent to.
Senator Andrea Hunley says under current Indiana law, health code violations against a housing unit for poor conditions go away once a renter vacates that space. Her bill would change that.
Property cannot be re-rented, that new tenants cannot move in. It cannot be reoccupied until that code violation has been fixed.
Some advocates have raised concerns that the bill doesn't include adequate enforcement mechanisms. Hunley's bill would only apply to Marion County. The bill is expected to receive a hearing this week. I'm Ben Thorpe.
The Lieutenant Governor and several lawmakers have called for the Family and Social Services Administration to pause proposed cuts. Abigail Ruman reports the proposed cuts would affect caregivers providing attendant care as legally responsible individuals.
During the COVID-19 public health emergency, FSSA allowed legally responsible individuals to provide care typically provided by home health aides due to workforce shortages. It recently announced this would no longer be allowed following a $1 billion shortfall in the Medicaid budget. Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch is a member of the state's Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Task Force.
I've heard we're trying to get information. I've heard we're going to adjust. I've heard no data. I've heard we're working on. At this point in time, until these questions can be answered, I would call upon FSSA to pause.
Other members of the task force raised concerns about transparency from FSSA about the data used to make the proposed cuts and how this may impact access to services. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Abigail Ruman.
The FSSA says it will work with families using this kind of care to transition to other avenues of care before the change goes into effect July 1st. And 39 people drowned in Lake Michigan last year, 6 of them along Indiana beaches and other public sites. Rebecca Thiel reports a state senator is trying, once again, to pass legislation that would require all public beaches and piers to have rescue equipment nearby.
The bill, authored by Senator Rodney Pohl, would require those who maintain public beaches and piers to have highly visible emergency flotation devices available. Local governments would also have to report drownings at public sites at least twice a year. A rip current caused Greg Froze's daughter Chase to drown off of Porter Beach in 2015 when she and friends stopped there to swim on their way to Michigan. He says having a flotation device is critical, especially if you're a novice rescuer.
A major reason why the 2 other girls were rescued is because providentially, the rescuing Good Samaritans had a boogie board and a kayak with them. There was no other floating device on that beach on that day.
Senator Pohl proposed a similar bill last year, but it was stalled when it didn't receive a hearing in the House Natural Resources Committee. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
The bill passed committee and now moves to the full Senate for consideration. And for our final story today, Indiana's business leaders say the economy needs more educated workers for the future. Aubrey Wright reports on one way local companies are investing in their employees.
Julie Hayes can call herself a graduate of Ivy Tech Community College.
I can't describe the words. It was just overwhelming, just to be able to finish in December and think, oh my goodness, I've really done this.
As a single mother, she went back to school, taking 2 classes per semester in Bloomington and working full-time at Cook Medical. She smiles, saying she earned a business administration certificate in December.
I feel like my daughter can look at me and be like, hey, if my mom can work and raise me and go to school and get a college education, I feel like it's a good example to her.
Cook paid for 100% of her attendance. Hayes is one of thousands of Indiana employees whose education and training are being covered by employers. This effort has been endorsed by the State House and the Chamber of Commerce to improve the economy. Here's former Chamber President Kevin Brinegar.
Quality and the skills of your workforce have risen to the top in terms of importance because we're now in a talent-driven economy.
Ivy Tech is a common partner as employers seek relevant and affordable courses. HR business partner Amanda Sparks helps connect employees like Hayes with college opportunities at Cook.
The goal there would be to help people to develop in their careers, provide them with the tools after they graduate to feel confident going into interviews and to move forward.
She says most people get their degrees and pay nothing out of pocket because of the My Cook Pathway program. Employees have to take courses relevant to their work and keep their grades up. She says it's a popular and beneficial program.
And I have seen quite a few people get promotions and be able to move around in the organization and continue on with their educations.
Down the road at Tassus, employees get the same benefit. Tassus is a plastic molding company that follows the Toyota Production System's principles. Talent Development and Recruiting Manager Sherry Dunbar-Cruzan says the company emphasizes respect for employees and continuous improvement.
Having that education and that upskill training allows us to represent those pillars to the highest degree that we can.
If an employee works for Tassus for at least 1 year, the company will pay for their education at Ivy Tech. She says if someone wants to start as an operator and end up in management, Tassus wants to help them.
We want this to be a career, not just a job.
Dunbar-Cruzan says the company works with Ivy Tech for many different training courses. At Ivy Tech Bloomington, Sarah Katie makes this happen with the Ivy Plus Career Link team. She helps create specialized training and courses for employees.
So it really starts through a conversation, through a handshake.
Every employer is assessed to see what skills need developed. Sometimes it's soft skills like leadership and communication. Other times it's more technical skills for production or management jobs. She says employees benefit from the education and the chance to move forward in their careers, and employers benefit by increasing retention and fighting off gaps in talent.
Showing that they invest in their employees is such an important and impactful way to keep their employees happy, satisfied, and ultimately on the team.
Katie also helps companies like Tassus secure grants to pay for their employees' education. Dunbar-Cruzan says her work with Katie is flexible to meet their current needs.
That's the great thing about Ivy Tech is Sarah and I get together and I said, this is what we'd like to do. She said, let me figure it out.
It isn't hard to find an endorsement for these education programs. Just ask Hayes.
I've learned so much. It's just a very good, useful resource.
Hayes is thinking about going back for her associate's degree. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Aubrey Wright.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by the following people who live in your community: Abriana Herron, Drew Daudelin, Kendall Antron, who composed the music for this podcast, and me, Darian Benson. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. If you liked today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.